Very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, in whichever part of the world you are. And once again, welcome to another episode of MSM Unify Podcast. I enjoy doing the sessions with leaders across the world because it's an opportunity for them to pour out their hearts in an unfiltered fashion. We all appear on speeches, on panel sessions, all groomed up, and you stick to the theme. But this is an opportunity I love engaging in unfiltered, raw conversations with leaders in this education landscape who are pioneering, causing potential change to serve the student at the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, today is an exceptional and remarkable day in my life because I get to chat with two incredible people that I know from this industry. Please put your hands together as I welcome my wonderful Maureen Manning and Sean Morgan joining me from the United States. Would you please allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to kindly introduce this wonderful lady on the screen that I get to know personally, and I had an opportunity to meet her in Gothenburg, Sweden last year. Dr. Maureen Manning is the founder and managing director of the Global Nexus Collective. She's a strategic advisor, she's a servant of a student, she's a speaker, she's a motivator, and her work is grounded in a deep understanding of how institutions articulate the value and the return on investments of global learning, education abroad, and work integrated learning experiences. Her rigor and her passion for education, I don't even have to say, just look at her and speak about her work. This speaks volumes. So, Maureen, thank you so much for joining today. It's a greatest honor to have you join us today. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I have to say, it's been such a joy to get to know you both professionally and personally. And I am a big fan of your podcast. I really love that you don't shy away from the hard questions. That being said, I can't wait to hear what questions you're going to ask of Sean and myself today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maureen. Now it's about my time to introduce this handsome person on my screen here, Sean, joining us from the United States. Sean, it's right you. It's you, who's the executive director of global programs from UMass. But what really I admire, I respect him for is throughout his career, Sean has been committed to expanding access to global learning, building international partnerships, and supporting the academic and personal success of students. This is the commitment that I always look forward to when I speak to leaders. It makes me rich knowing this person in this industry. His professional interests include international students and scholar services, global program development, and creating pipeline for the next generation of leaderships within the international education landscape. Sean, thank you so much for joining us today on this lovely podcast.
It is an absolute pleasure. Like Maureen, I am honored to be part of this. I'm a big fan of the podcast. And I'll say I'm fanboying right now that I get to spend some time with you, and always a pleasure to spend time with my good friend Maureen.
Lovely. Let's get started. And before we begin, let's set the theme for today's podcast. The world we build our strategies around, where the four English speaking countries capture the majority of globally mobile students, is under serious pressure. We all talk about the big four, and there's so much of noise around it. Whether that's a temporary disruption or a structural shift is something that we would like to explore today together so that our learners can directly get to hear from you. And this is something so predominant for us. So, Maureen, do you have something to add in this particular concept? Because let me put a number on the table. Global student mobility has more than tripled since 2000. And this is phenomenally fantastic. And I love how few decades ago, somebody who has an aspiration for international education had to come from a certain level of fiscal bandwidth in our society. But now you see it goes into villages in the tier three. A farmer would like to send his son and daughter, a janitor would like to send his son and daughter for international education. So the appetite for global exposure is getting more organic than ever. I'm pumped about it. But at the same time, yet now we are watching Canada, US, Australia report sharp drops in enrollment. So, Maureen, what does that tell us about rebalancing? Is it something becoming more permanent?
Yeah, great question. And way to go to kick off this conversation right out of the gate with these compelling numbers that you shared. What it feels like to me is a completely different enrollment cycle. It's not just a standard enrollment cycle, and this has been a similar theme, as you say, since 2020, and for wildly different reasons. So I feel that it is a recalibration of student mobility, and we're watching this all unfold in real time. and the numbers are looking different quarter to quarter, year to year, and very dependent on geopolitical tensions that we're seeing unfold in front of us in live time as well. I think students and families are navigating risk in a different way than they have before. And much of that is due to the steady stream of information that they are fed through social media that they're able to access within their peer network. And of course, because the way they're searching for information is vastly different now
Yes.
with AI. So what I'm watching most closely, Babitha, is the change between institutional intention and how it's the public interpretation of that.
Mhm.
So, how universities are relaying their message and how that's being received from by students and families and community, but also not just the university narrative, but how students and families are consuming their information writ large.
Absolutely. I think my takeaway from what you said is perception and how the way you look at international education has transitioned. It's like an avatar transition from when I aspired to study international education. And that's the concept. I keep coming back to work. What we do at MSM Unify is it's the gap between the policy reality and the perception of policy in itself. Because in student recruitment, perception often does more damage than the actual rule in itself. And Maureen, you personally, you've spent so much of substantial, incredible, remarkable time of your career examining how these narratives shape perception and trust. Very important pillars. In today's mobility of landscape, how much of student decision making is driven by actual policies versus the narratives that the families are absorbing?
Another great question here, and I think it's an answer of it's both. If
Yeah.
we're looking at a Venn diagram, it falls somewhere in the middle because, of course, I think all eyes are on in our sector, families, students who are ready to embark on their journey as an international student, as well as those who are already
Yeah.
in their host country are very keenly watching what is happening unfold in their host country, their home country, and as well around the globe. And what is a little bit shocking that I haven't seen in my 30 years in this field is the speed at which policy is changing. It is rapidly evolving, and it's a case. And I think my colleague Sean will agree that when you open up your phone for the first time that day, like what is going to await me? Like what news has happened overnight somewhere that is going to drastically impact the work that we do every day? And I have to say, often it is with fear or a bit of trepidation that I'm opening up my phone and wondering, like, well, um, what news is going to await us? And so think of that from the student. We're used to that, right? Think
Yeah.
of that from the student perspective. You're 17 years old, you're 18 years old, and you're making a decision that's going to impact the rest of your life. So you want to make the most informed decision. This has large financial implications as well. So, where is my money best spent? Where is my time best spent? How am I going to make that decision that best sets me up for the most successful and joyful future? And so, because interpretation and policy and intention are often different. I
Yes.
think universities are wise to really consider how they're getting their message across, the language that they're using to do so, and the medium that they're using to get their message out there, because it's not always the policies, even as practitioners and professionals, the policy interpretation can be a very tricky thing.
Oh, absolutely. While the policies are changing, love what you said, Maureen. The way the perceptions and policies and how you view them are changing. I would like to pick up on the word that you said, the speed at which it's changing. Can you imagine the overwhelming effect it has on a 17-year-old student? As well as for us, when you pick up the phone, it's not the change in itself, the speed at which it's changing is fabulous here. Sean, I want to bring in you here on this because there are some who argue that the US is failing international students post graduation, indicating that the path of staying is replete with hurdles. What do you have to say about this sentiment here?
I mean, I would disagree with that as far
Mhm.
as the United States as a whole. I can't speak for the entire country, but I can speak
Of course.
for what's going on in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that's the big aspect. Getting back to Maureen's part earlier, perception and messaging. I mean,
Yes.
students and families have to remember the United States is huge.
Yes.
And unfortunately, and I experienced this with my own family back in Europe, if something happens in the West Coast, the Midwest, whether it's a tragedy, a natural disaster, they send a text message, "Is everyone okay at home?" Well,
Yes.
yes, that's 1,000 miles away. It's 3,000 miles away. It doesn't actually impact. So it's that perception that if something happens in the United States, it's impacting everyone. Now,
Yes.
that's the first point, but universities are working incredibly hard to ensure
Yes.
ultimately the ROI is there for students and
Mhm.
families because they're two important things that we constantly hear, not only from international families, but also domestic families.
Yes.
What's the return on investment? We're putting a huge amount of time and personal finances into educating our children.
Yes.
What's the end game? And the second point there is my child going to be safe? And
Yes.
that's the other major question that comes into place. And again, we spend a lot of time highlighting the fact that Massachusetts is the safest place in the United States. We work hard with our university as well as the other universities. Massachusetts is a microcosm. There are over 120 universities and colleges within the Commonwealth. In the greater Boston area, there are 29 four-year universities. And we work very closely together, public and private, to ensure that our students are incredibly safe here. I mean, we joke every September, quarter of a million students arrive into Boston and change the landscape. We are a city of education, and we work to make sure that students feel safe and feel supported. Now, the postgraduate question,
Yes.
every university works hard to ensure, and getting back to the return on investment, that students are aware of where our graduates go and what pipelines there are. And we connect students with alumni very quickly, very early to make
Very good.
sure that they're aware what pathways are available to them. Now, there are, of course, hurdles for international students as far as
Yeah.
post work opportunities. But as you kick things off at the top, the landscape has shifted. It's no longer the big four. We're looking at, really realistically the big 10 now with
Yes.
the emerging. And
Yes.
students have options. But at the end of the day, I will be biased. I moved to the United States 20 years ago. The United States is still number one as for opportunity post graduation. And the hurdles that exist can be overcome and they can be navigated when students and families engage with the universities, engage with the global offices to find out how they can mitigate certain factors that are in place. And also bringing Maureen comment back in, some of it is just perception and misperception in that a tweet may be sent out in the middle of the night at 2 a.m.
Yes.
that is seen by many as, well, this is a new policy.
Yes.
No, that this is not a policy. This
Yes.
is perhaps a desire. It's a rant at times. It
Yes.
does not mean the United States has changed. And while there are certainly hurdles in entering the United States at times,
Yes.
once the student gets over those, and every university will help their student navigate that process, once they're in their home, in their new institution, their home away from home, they'll be welcomed, they'll be supported, they'll be lifted up. And speaking for the University of Massachusetts Boston, we make sure that every student feels welcome as best as we can and supported the entire way through their career, whether that be undergraduate, through graduate school, and beyond as part of our alumni network.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Sean. I picked up on three keywords that you said: how your university is participative, committed, and empowered to make sure that the students are navigated in the safest way possible.
Mhm.
I love that. I love that. I always say that student is the king in our jobs. And absolutely no student, I don't exist. So I love the fact that the commitment plays an incredible role, and that makes us distinctive as we are multiple players in this ecosystem. And that's where it lands at MSM Unify. Maureen, coming back to what you've told me, how AI is playing an important role in the student decision making. At MSM Unify, we always believe in a consultative approach when speaking to students and how parents are asking this basic question. 20 years ago, the question was, what kind of job would I land in? But today, because of the geopolitical situations, the first and topmost question, the chronological order of the questionnaire has changed. The first question is, will I be safe there? Where will I
Yeah.
stay? And then comes the ROI. Can you see the chronological change? Warren, what do you have to add about this?
Yeah, I mean, safety and belonging have always been top of mind for students, and this goes back to my early days in recruiting, and even as a host family for 12-time host family, in talking to parents from a personal level and a professional level, that is parents' number one concern: will my child be safe? And again, this is where the perception can often thwart our efforts because, as Sean said, you might hear about something that happens thousands of miles away and say, like, well, is my child safe? Well, that's across the country and that's an isolated incident. An issue is when isolated incidents become more and more common and there is a desensitization of significant and serious and tragic issues. The distrust and the trepidation with students and families, I think, can become exacerbated. And I also want to pick up on something that Sean said, and that is about disinformation. And
Mm,
in over 30 years in this industry, I'd say the past 10 and even the past six, the amount of disinformation that misinformation and both mis and disinformation that we have to combat, not just in our sector, but this is something that many of us are dealing with. But I'll keep it to the international education sector. That it can be really hard to mitigate, and so it means that personal nature, right? We send out communications and we talk about safety and belonging and ROI and identity, all of those things. But it's that human connection when you can talk to a
yes.
peer who has been to that university that you're looking to go to and say, what was it really like on campus? What was it like in your dorm? So talking to a
Eh,
peer, talking to that trusted agent,
Yeah.
talking to an actual person in the admissions office
Yeah.
so that we're not just reliant on what you pull up in that AI search, which may or may not be accurate.
Accurate. That's true. That's true. I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for that, Maureen. So, let's move on to from the demand side to the supply side for a moment. And because the conversation about shifting centers usually focuses on where the students are coming from, that could be India, Nigeria, Vietnam, or Middle East. We know those numbers. We know that. We work on that pipeline day in and day out. But what I find more interesting is where they're going and who is actually building genuine long-term competitiveness as a destination versus who is just filling a gap that the traditional players have temporarily taken a backseat. Sean, according to you, which destinations are doing the real work to become structurally competitive and which are most benefiting from someone else, let's say, for the lack of better word, misfortune?
That's a great question.
It's kind of
I mean,
uncomfortable question, but that's what we
well,
do
I mean,
job.
it's uncomfortable, but it's the reality of the
Yeah.
situation. I mean, again, being from Europe but living in the United States and having been here for 20 years, the United States, Canada, UK, Australia can't let rest on their laurels and just expect that we open the doors where people are going to come.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and looking at it as a business model, that's a failed business model. You can't just think we're going to open our doors, people will flood through. As far as markets that are emerging and have learned from the big four, I would say, I mean, China is actually doing a great job in recruiting international students to come there. Um, and it is that aspect again, going back as well as Ireland. Ireland are doing an amazing job in welcoming
Mm,
students. Germany and a phenomenal job at the postgraduate level, not so much the undergraduate level, and that's due to restrictions within language instruction that
yes.
are currently within the German government. But there are pushes within their higher ed landscape to try and change that. So we're seeing the market shifts constantly. But again, it comes back to what I say is brand recognition also. And while those markets may be tapping in, the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia, we've been at the top for so long, we still have that brand recognition. And when you look at rankings and look at the top global rankings in universities, the United States still dominates. So even though we see this dip, we see this concern and rise in other markets, I personally, and probably arrogantly, because I live here and I'm invested in it, I do see a rebound in this.
I
You
love
know,
that.
there is an aspect we are. still producing the top research universities in the world. We are
So
still integrated heavily within STEM fields, AI generation, AI, everything that's being developed within emerging market aspects of workforce development is still coming out of the United States. So we're still driving forward. And what we're seeing is also just a blip. And the market will correct itself eventually. Now, does that mean the market the landscape is going to go back to the way it was? No. I
no,
mean, there is that aspect of there are
adaptive.
other options. Yeah, it's adaptive. There are other options for students and for families to look at.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the United States is still driving and still has the top ranked tertiary level of education within the globe. And we have that brand recognition, whether it be within Massachusetts or California, New Jersey, New York. I mean, you look, the top universities in the world are scattered throughout the United States, with some of them in our competing nations, and that's fine. They can have them. But
That's
um, no, I still think the United States has a lot to offer, and we are still a young nation here. I mean, we're coming up, it's 250 years. We
yeah.
are still an infant nation comparatively to the United Kingdom, comparatively to other countries around the world. And we're a nation of immigrants. And that is the biggest difference that we
Yeah.
find in those areas. That this is a nation that is not homogenous, that we are growing. And even within our own campus, I mean, Boston, Boston is a city of immigrants. Boston is a landscape. We are a minority majority city. Our
Yeah.
university here, we are a minority majority university. We represent the landscape that is the city of Boston, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the United States as a whole, in that 60% of our student body come from immigrant families. And that's not just our international students, that's our domestic students as well. And so you walk through our campus and it's a microcosm of what the melting pot of the United States is.
Amalgamation. Sean, I just love, respect, and a big fan of your conviction about the geographic location that you're based in and how United States is still holding the flag to be the forefront of international education landscape. And that's phenomenal. And kudos to the kind of amalgamation of percentage of international students and domestic students that are living under the same roof and trying to engage, work together, and build something so phenomenal for the days to come. And that brings me to something that I really love, the kind of collaboration between UMass and EM Normandy partnership as a case study in itself.
Yep.
Wow. Can we just take a moment and say, wow, because it's a public university and not a tier one brand with a multi-million international office or something. But could you please tell a little bit more about this kind of cross-border international collaboration that works, and where do most of such potential high value deals could go wrong?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the second part of your question. Where do international partnerships go wrong?
Yeah.
It's
It's
whenever there's no true vision. I mean, and we see this at every university throughout the United States, throughout the world. We
yeah,
all have a drawer. Every senior international officer, every director of global has a desk drawer or a database
yeah,
that has hundreds of agreements that have been signed over years.
yeah.
And a lot of them are just that. They're just signatures on pieces of paper.
It's just sitting like there.
They're sitting there, they're collecting dust, and nothing really comes of them. But for an agreement, for a partnership, and that's the key term in there. It's partnerships. It's a marriage between institutions. How are we going to make this work? And it takes dedication and buy-in at all levels, not just the international office, not just the student body, not just the faculty, not just senior leadership. Everyone has to be involved in the process in developing a strong institutional partnership. And EM Normandy is a perfect example of that. Two
Yes.
institutions on paper, as you look at them,
Yeah.
shouldn't work between
Yeah.
the mission and drive of EM Normandy and University of Massachusetts Boston. We're a public research university. We were
Yes.
developed as the Public University of Boston. EM Normandy, a different mission and vision, but
Yeah.
our business schools and their folk, both triple accredited, both
Yeah.
focus on workforce development, and then both moving in the 21st century to global workforce development, recognizing that multinational corporations aren't going to go away, that students being educated today are going to work in a global landscape. And from our side at UMass Boston, where the majority of our students are from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, from the city of Boston, the majority don't have in their lexicon of global mobility as they
Mm.
apply to university. It's not in their mindset. And a lot of them just don't have, at times, to be honest, the means A lot of our students are working full-time jobs. They're studying part-time. They're trying to figure out how to afford university. So the thought of taking a semester off, a year off is not always there. So in that case, we develop strong partnerships and programs where we can bring the world to them and bring
Yeah.
short-term programs, bring students to
Yeah.
Boston.
Yeah.
And then also integrating with what's already here. I mean, within the city of Boston, the French American Chamber of Commerce exists here, and it is hugely impactful with the French companies that exist within the United States. I mean, off the top of my head, just two major ones automatically are Sodexo, major food supplier, pretty much, I'd say
Yeah.
a huge majority of universities
Everyone
in the
knows
state.
this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Acela also. I mean, the
Yeah.
main supplier of rail services for Amtrak,
Mm.
two major French companies. And our partnership in France is extended is that the former mayor of Paris, Mayor Hidalgo, she'll be flying in next week. She's the speaker at our graduate commencement next week. And that shows the
Cool.
focus that we have with regards to bringing the world to Boston. Boston is, like I said earlier, a multinational city. We are an international city as well. The city of Boston has 14 sister cities around the globe. And we lean into that as part of our identity as well to make sure that we bring opportunities to our students and match as close as possible with institutions and programs that are going to work for us. But again, long way around, there has
Mm.
to be buy-in. There has to, it can't be just a matter that I decide, and I never do, oh, this will be a great partnership for us. Certainly, when I get approached by an institution, I take a look at it, my team and I evaluate, and then we have meetings with the institution to find out what's a good matchmaking process. Is this a student mobility agreement and only a student mobility agreement?
Yeah.
Great, that's what it will be. Is this a research agreement? And again, as a research university, we dive into that. And how is the research going to benefit not only the university, the student body, but also the
Mhm.
Commonwealth of Massachusetts? And again, feeding back into that infrastructure. How is the research taking place there in a global sense going to support the mission of the university on both sides of the water and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as a whole?
Lovely. Wow. I need to take a break to absorb all that Sean has told me because Sean, I really love the fact I picked up was you said vision, which is
Mhm.
more of they're not used in the vision and mission statements, but we don't often come back to it. It's a beautiful reminder how this is a cornerstone of everything that we're building and how you're bridging and providing opportunities in terms of movement, mobility, segmenting what the student exactly want. And wonderful point that you brought into limelight is benefiting all the stakeholders who are a
Mhm.
part of it. That could be student, that could be partner institution, as well as your local community. Bang on. And that's exactly what we do at MSM Unify because we are sitting amidst this ecosystem, working with institutions, working with students, working with parents, working with agents. So we are in the middle of this boiling pot of trust. And this brings to my next question to you, Maureen, because that agent layer is large and largely unregulated in most markets and deeply influential. So, is that narrative that the agents are partners in access holding up in 2026, or has the trust eroded, Maureen?
No, I would say there is a great level of trust, and I mean, listen, we know agents play an important role in helping expand access and helping students navigate the complexity of international admissions and enrollment, that whole process, and many operate with tremendous amount of integrity, and they meaningfully create student-centered processes and policies and commitment to that student and those families, and have the track records to back that up. And so at the same time, we also know that trust depends on transparency and accountability. And I think that there's been some sensationalism in some the highlighting of some bad actors. And of course, in any industry, there are going to be bad actors out there. And so, if you choose to focus on that, or again,
Or are you
uh,
sensationalizing at the point of time? Yes.
yeah, exactly. In any misinformation. So, I mean, of course, it's important for families to do their homework and do that research, talk to peers. That peer to peer network, I can't underscore the importance of that enough. And having that sort of a sounding board with folks who have been through that process. Um, and worked with those trusted agents. So, families want confidence, they want recommendations, and they want that's grounded in best fit and not necessarily volume, right? So they want that personal nature. And I think that that's where we keep coming back to, and we mentioned it a few times in this conversation. They want that personal touch. This is their child. This is or the student. This is their life, their choice. It has tremendous implications financially, professionally, socially, and otherwise. And so there has to be that level of trust. And how do you build trust? By building the relationships. And how do you build the relationships? By that human connection. So again, can't underscore the importance of that human centered, student first mentality when you're seeking to find an agent that works for you, who's going to look at your needs and help you identify what is best fit. So, and the other piece that I'll mention is sustainable recruitment depends on successful student outcomes. So
Yes.
that's the piece that needs to be really looked at is, we talk about rankings, we talk about identity, we talk about the fact that brand USA will remain strong. Um, but not just relying on identity alone. And I know some students will come to the table saying, like, I want X, Y, or Z university because
Yes.
it's nothing they've heard of. They know that name, it's a brand name. All
Yes.
that is great. But what programs do they offer that is a fit for
Exactly.
you? Geographically located,
Yes.
right? That's a fit for you. And most importantly, what is it that you want to do with this one wild and precious life? And what institution is going to be the best fit to set you up for success for that particular endeavor? And so, really, when you're focusing on what is the outcome, what is the end goal, and a little bit less on the what is the identity and what is it that I think I know, or that I've heard since I've been growing up about institution X, Y, or Z, and being a bit more open minded about what institutions are out there, because with 4,000 plus HEIs in the US alone,
Yes.
there are many, if not most, that most students have never heard of. And so it's up to those agents to help shine a light on some
On
of those
yes.
institutions that they may not have heard of that would be a beautiful fit for that individual student.
Cool. Thank you so much for that, Maureen. The human centered, student first approach, nothing beats that. But nonetheless, we are seeing a shift that we've addressed in the top of our conversation when we began our podcast is the inclusivity of AI. Because I remember when I was a student many, many, many years ago. So let the brain keep running. The way of having an international education is something that you speak to somebody who's gone there to get a kind of experiential. But as we speak right now, in the bedrooms, in the libraries of students somewhere sitting in Bangladesh or in Vietnam, is no longer talking to an agent, is no longer probably visiting our website, but is reaching out to AI. He's asking those questions to AI. So my question out there to all of us is what's going to happen to everything that we've built? We've built ranking systems, we've built pedigrees, we built repositories of information that could help the student, but the student chooses to go to AI and is depending on the AI to make the decision making for him whilst the resources are available. So, Sean, what do you think about this? I mean, who loses the influences in that world, and does actually anybody gain something in this shift?
I think a combination of both. I think let's start, those who lose out are those who are either afraid of AI
Mm,
or not willing to use it to their benefit. I
kind
mean,
of,
at the end of the day, AI is a tool.
yes.
And I constantly equate this, we hear it in higher ed, this concern about AI, the use of AI in the classroom. Actually, not even higher ed. I mean, my children are still in middle school and high school, and we hear it constantly there, the use of AI. Well, let's jump back 15 years ago. We heard that fear of, oh, students using Wikipedia in the classroom.
Yes.
Jump back in before that when the internet rolled out. Oh, they
Oh,
can't be using the internet. It must be
yes.
only textbooks used for research, et cetera, et
Yes.
cetera.
What
Well,
has
we
happened?
adapted. Education adapted, and this is just the next step in that adaptation to universities using AI to their benefit. And also, universities have a responsibility, and this is where I'll come in. I plug my own university as well, how to teach the ethical use of AI, and that's the piece that's missing. And the University of Massachusetts Boston, we're the first university in the United States to create a university-based institute based around that from one of our alumni, Paul English, the founder of Kayak Travel,
Yeah.
AI-based website,
Wow.
came to us and said, "I want something done about ethical use of AI." And so we created the Paul English Applied Institute of Artificial Intelligence. Again, knowing where we stand in that aspect.
Mm.
Our friends across the water in Cambridge at two very well ranked and two very well known universities, and I'm not going to say their names because I don't need to. Um,
Don't need to. Yes.
they can develop it, and
Yeah.
we're not going to compete with that. But we will teach
Mm.
employees, we will teach educators, we will teach students how to use it and how to use it effectively. Now, that's the pitfall that a lot of universities are going to fall into is that recognizing that AI is not giving the answers. It's combing through the data that exists on the internet about the institution. And unfortunately, a lot of institutions don't update their data sets. And so if your
Yes.
university slips in that AI ranking, well,
Mm.
then that's on your institutional advancement team, your institutional research team, not providing the data that exists out there and
Yeah.
correcting things. I mean, we go back, again, go back 15 years ago when we'd look, a student would Google a university
Yes.
and it would pop up in the top. And again, not recognizing that that may be a pay advertisement at the top and not the correct information they're actually looking for. AI is pulling that information through. And again, recognizing also the student may not be asking the correct question to the
Yeah.
AI chatbot that they're using. So what we're going to see, the successful universities are going to incorporate AI use into their admissions process, into their recruitment drive. But getting back to Maureen's point that she just made before, not ignoring the human element. Because
Oh, yes.
it's
I'm a big
one
fan of.
thing,
Yes.
it's one thing to use AI to your benefit, but you're not going to get the real sense of a campus and an experience unless you talk to an admissions counselor, a rep of the university, but also a
Love it. Love it.
student.
Yes.
Leaning back and having student to student connection, that peer to peer connection
Yeah.
goes so much further than anything I can do. And I tell that constantly to prospective students. Whenever I have our admissions team will call and say, "Can you talk to family from country X?" I'm more than happy to have conversation. Like, but why don't we find a student who's from the same region that they're from, who's been through this process, who can speak from the heart and reality? Again, they don't want to hear from old bald white guy from Ireland about their experience. They want to hear from someone who's lived it. And that person to person interaction goes so much further. In the universities that really integrate the student experience through the entire structure of the campus and then pulling in AI as that, using AI tools to put the student story out there to make sure that you're using AI to perhaps if a student has written a piece for you, okay, well then let's look at how can we use AI to translate that into a language that will be more understood. Because again, there's often an arrogance aspect that we just think every parent's going to speak English.
Yeah.
Well, their students may speak English, the parent may not. So can we use AI to our benefit to translate our materials to get information out there sooner? Can we use AI to support the messaging that we get across? And then even in my own office, can we use AI to have a chatbot available to answer baseline questions whenever the office is closed on Eastern Standard Time, but it's middle of the workday in Mumbai and someone needs a question answered right away. So how can AI be used as a tool to support the office? But the fallback is please contact the office during these hours or leave your
Exactly.
contact information and someone will reach out to you.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. I love that, Sean. Oh my goodness. I really love the fact that you use the word how we're using AI as a tool and it is in our hands to use it effectively. In the
Mm,
month of April, I was in Istanbul, like you, in the same conference, Yuri, and I was speaking on decision making on how the impact of AI, and I resonated. I must have sounded like an old grandmother, but I said, no matter how AI is affecting in today's world, human approach is needed. Is needed
mm,
because a student sitting in Vietnam would like to speak to somebody who comes from the same background, the same culture. Culture is the context. Storyline is the context, and this is exactly what a student would like to reflect because he says, this guy has been from my land, so he understands what I'm looking for. Because somebody from South Asia, his ROI is not necessarily job, but also a cultural transaction for him at the end of the day. That might not be for somebody from Ireland. This kind of I love. So I wasn't a grandmother when I was speaking of this age, so I really love the fact that. But also, all that is now connected to rankings. We've all relentlessly worked together and we built an entire ecosystem around it. But I believe that Gen Z and probably tomorrow the Gen Alpha are more skeptical than ever, especially when it comes to the methodologies that are contested. So I just would like to ask you, Maureen, are rankings still the dominant proxy for quality in today's world? Are still students evaluating that when they're approaching the moment about choosing a university or a business school?
It's one factor, but it's one of many.
One
And
of
yeah, I mean, rankings are never going to disappear, but I think their role is definitely evolving, and that's in large part to AI and how it's changing the way students gather information. And this is exactly to your point, both Sean and Babs.
yeah.
How are students gathering their information? To what extent are they using AI to do their searches? And how do they evaluate value? And that's the critical point. How do they? And is their value system and what they're looking for in a best fit university, is that aligned with what the factors are in rankings? And to what extent are they aligned? And to what extent do they differ? And I just want to give you one example that's a very personal example, but I think it's very much to your point that you just mentioned. And Sean, you spoke about, we were talking about how students gather information. Are they looking at rankings? How are they using AI? And my youngest child is a senior in high school, as you both know. And so this
Yes.
year, I was the one who was, well, alongside my son, going through this process and getting to see it after spending so many years in this field, but then getting to see this from that parent and family point of view. And how is my child gathering information? And yes, is he using AI to pull up the information about the different schools that he's interested in? And then is he ranking them against each other using AI, and what prompts is he using? So watching him go through that process and then giving my input about, well, check this prompt and look at financial health of the institution, all of the different things, employability, work integrated learning, internship opportunities, what's the ROI? All of that was critical in our information gathering as a family. But ultimately, and the choice was up to him. Ultimately, I think what sort of put it over the edge amongst wonderful schools that were in his, top 5 or 10, what made the difference was the very last campus visit where he had the opportunity to shadow a student for a day. So it wasn't necessarily listening to his mom, who has decades
Yeah.
in the field. It wasn't even all the
Yeah.
information that he pulled up in AI. It wasn't going to the open house days and listening to the professors talk, or, all of that was great. And all of that added value, and all of that helped inform his decision. But it was at the end of the visit where he spent a day with the student in
Failed
his
his decision.
made his decision on the ride home. He said, "That's the school for me."
There you go. There you go. This is a practical, personal experience that has vetted everything that we have just said. I believe that when a student is choosing a university, he's not just choosing a university, he's choosing his life. So living under the shadow of a student for a day to understand how he behaves, where he goes, that's exactly, this cannot be replaced by AI. I mean, we might have virtual campus tours, but that human approach without any, yeah.
Sorry.
No, no, go ahead, Maureen,
No,
please.
I was just saying, like, this is just one example, but it is not an outlier.
Mm.
As an example, this is, I think, very common, and it's, how students gather information, gather it online, go to if you are able to go to the campus, whether it is a virtual tour or an
Exactly.
in-person tour, talking to agents, talking to
Yeah.
admissions officer, and then making that final decision. But again, I think that peer-to-peer information sharing
It's the
is
king.
critical. I think it's critical. But again, I guess the point here is it is all of these things. If it was just talking to a student each time, that wouldn't be so impressive. If it was just looking at rankings, I don't think that's going to best inform your decision. It is all of these pieces
Amalgamation.
together
Yeah.
to make the best informed decision about one's future.
Bravo. Love it. We've just entered the last leg of our podcast, and I want all of us to be very direct here because I believe that The reality and the raw information comes out when we ask each other time and again the most uncomfortable questions in the room. So, Sean, let's start with you. If you could force one structural change in policy in how institutions behave or in how the industry operates, what would be the most meaningfully improved outcomes for globally mobile students across the world?
Great question. Um, Easier access to global internships for students. I think that would be the biggest game changer. And I'm not speaking this as far as the United States, I'm speaking across the board. We live, like I said earlier in the podcast, we live in a world of multinational corporations.
Yes.
Those corporations have so much sway in governmental policy, whether it be
Yeah.
the United States, whether it be France, whether it be Germany, Australia, China, et cetera, so on and so forth. Making it easier for a student in Kuala Lumpur to start university there, have an internship with a company, and then transfer that internship to another location while they're studying abroad, while they're taking a semester overseas to experience a new culture, a new educational system, but also how that company operates in that area and bringing that information back home would be a game changer for international education and globally mobile students. That I think, unfortunately, is one of the biggest barriers that exists. And also for those companies to pay students. Unfortunately, there are
Yeah.
far too many organizations that exist and expect students are going to have an unpaid internship with them and be happy. That's not the world that we live in. But we have the higher education landscape has changed. It is not something that is unattainable. It is something, especially like again, commenting in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has led the United States in offering free access to higher education for underserved communities. Our governor rolled out 4 years ago free community college. So, associate's degree, 2 years is free within the Commonwealth. University of Massachusetts Boston was the first 4 year institution to offer free 4 year education to underserved communities. So, it is more attainable, and then that next step of global mobility for those families has to come into play, and working with industry to have paid internship and paid global opportunities should be the drive that institutional leaderships are taking forward, and quite frankly, embarrassing those companies that refuse to pay students.
Yeah.
They're getting a lot out of that, but again, it goes back, like I said, with university partnerships, it's a two-way street,
Yes.
and so on our responsibility as institutions is that we cannot treat industry, we cannot treat programs with a sense of arrogance in that, well, we're
Mm.
the institutions of higher ed and we will tell you what workforce development looks like.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to open our doors to companies and listen to them as far as how much time and how much money as a company are you investing in retraining graduates instead of it being, how can we help better train our graduates and prepare them for your workforce, for the field, so that they can hit the ground running on day one post graduation and not have to be retrained in certain aspects of a program. So I think both of those aspects is industry opening up more paid opportunities for students, but universities opening their doors to cooperate with industry to adapt our curriculum for the changing shape of the world.
Sean, I'll be very honest with you. I've had the opportunity, very humbling opportunity of speaking with leaders across the world. Nobody has ever pinpointed this fact of paid global internships. Man, I salute this. I salute this. I mean, I think this could be the driving force in empowering students to take brave and adventurous movements and mobility options. Thank you so much for that, Sean. Thank you. Thank you for that. Maureen, over to you. The same question. Your thoughts on this, please.
Okay. I mean, to echo Sean's point, absolutely think that the key is we need stronger integration between mobility programs, internships, work integrated learning, career services, employer engagement. Absolutely 100% agree. To that end, in just about 2 weeks' time, both Sean and I will be attending the International Internship Network Conference where we'll be discussing exactly this. So it's very much top of mind because those conversations are the ones that are some of the hottest conversations right now are around that integration. And in the past, career services And to some extent still today, career services are their own department and organization operating very differently from the education abroad office, for example. What I'd like to see in the future is more integration between these departments, as well more opportunities for students to engage directly with employers, and curriculum that speaks to what the employers are telling us very directly what they are looking for in their new hires. What skills and competencies and attributes should these students have? How are we taking that information that is being readily supplied to us and making any adjustments or alteration in curriculum that we're using to prepare students for the world of work? Are they two separate entities, or are we seamlessly integrating work, integrated learning within these curriculums, within these education abroad experiences? So I think international internships are a key to success, and they may well be virtual internships.
Why
So
not?
exactly, and there are plenty of programs that offer these types of work experiences for students. That is key.
Super. Superman. I love that we ended our podcast with this phenomenal pointer that honestly, like, look at my face. I'm not saying this to please you guys, but never have I ever heard that this could be the structural change that we could start having conversations around to make universities be actually the place where a student comes in to integrate into the workforce. I love it. I love it. Thank you, guys. Thank you, both of you, for joining this remarkable conversation today. It has been so impactful, influential. And my takeaway was vision, the perception, the commitment, the empowerment that we are showing to our universities, most importantly, the adaptive nature that we are continuously striving to build as institutions and leaders in this ecosystem. So thoroughly thank you, Maureen. Thank you, Sean, for joining my podcast today. Man, I feel very rich talking to both of you. And this is the kind of conversations, tough conversations, uncomfortable questions that we need to ask each other. That's where I know what my next conversation is going to be. This paid internship is something that's going to ring a bell in my heart all the time, and that's my personal biggest takeaway. So thank you everybody for joining this session. And you've heard these leaders pour their heart out to talk about how the adaptive change of this education landscape is moving through and pioneering through, and how they committed to serve the student. So if you'd like to engage in more conversations like this, we are here. Maureen and Sean are on LinkedIn, extremely active. Reach out to them, and these are people that you would like to either have a coffee, shake a leg, or even go out for a drink. It's going to be great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining wherever you are. Stay blessed.